Hi guys. So yeah, welcome to my webinar on mid-career pivot essentials, accelerated learning for busy professionals like yourselves. We had a few Eventbrite issues where the Zoom link is not working, but luckily we've got 5 people in, but there's a bunch of others that can't make it today. My apologies. However, I will record this and share it on YouTube as compensation. So thank you. Thanks for spending the Saturday here today. And hopefully you'll all take away something from my journey, even if you're not looking for a complete career pivot. These lessons are evidence-based and I feel would benefit most people in this new environment where it's becoming fast-paced with the advent of AI taking over many jobs and how we actually navigate that complexity around that in the job market in particular. Anywhere from being an engineer to a physio, like previously myself, or anything in between. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see my slides? So, so I actually just did this out of my personal interest. So essentially, um, I was during COVID lockdown. And I was like, my practice is done because we had this famous Melbourne extended lockdown in Australia, in Melbourne actually, that resulted in my clinic closing at the time. So basically, I was out of work for more than 6 months. So as a result of that, I was scared for my family, for myself, for my identity as a physio. And I also been interested in tech. So as a result of that, I did a lot of research and things on how I can actually do a career pivot or upskill myself to fit in a world where maybe at the time we're going to work remotely for some extended period of time that we didn't even know how long would last for. So I'm sure you guys all seem to be in Melbourne, so you can relate to that issue there. And being a physio or hands-on physio, that's even a bigger issue. So what I did was I actually came together with a course, put together a course that's tailored for mid-career professionals just to share because there are a lot of questions about my career pivot, which I'll talk about later, that emphasizes how you accelerate your learning and learning adaptation strategies mid-career. When you're a bit older, you don't have that flexible, fluid mind as you are as an undergraduate or high school student. We learn differently. The science is there to support that, which blends practical strategies, which can ultimately transform your mindset around this and help you get your next job, promotion, or career pivot. So this course aims to empower participants to embrace change. And it's so important and crucial now, given that we've got generative AI out there and there's this race on who's going to develop general artificial intelligence, meaning they're going to replace many of the human tasks. And if you don't need to know this, your children may need to know this too. So, um, and I also talk about in the course teaching, unlearning old practices and assumptions you've made in the past and relearning with a new beginner's mindset. And hopefully this will equip many of you guys with some of the tools, even during this webinar, because I'll be sharing the key points from that, some of the key highlights and insights for you to get a feel for what the course will be, as well as some practical strategies for you to implement and make some change in your lives. So I'd like to just quickly introduce everyone. So Clint, so tell me a bit about you, why you're interested in this area.
Yeah, sure.
One or two sentences is fine, icebreaker.
Yeah, no. So obviously, my name's Clint. I'm actually a mechanical design engineer, but I also run a dance studio in the evenings. And I've gone through a few different career changes. So I was in industry, then I was in academia, and then back in industry again. So I guess I'm interested in the notion of being able to be flexible, I guess, move from industry to industry. So it's just a general interest for me. And then the topic also lines up with learning and such. When I was in academia, I was a lecturer and I was an educator. So I got an interest in learning as well. So I think it was those three things that have probably prompted my interest in being here.
Excellent. Very unique career as a dance and an engineer, which is great. David, welcome.
All right. pushing the right button. Thank you very much. Thanks, Clint. That was interesting. My path has been very odd, where I started off as a software engineer a long time ago and evolved over time into project management. And I look after a lot of technical projects, whether it be hardware, software, whatever it is. But I've also faced the issue that most of the time I'm contracted. So the problem I face always is that, what am I going to do between contracts? Because the contract could be rolling over to the next one, or it could be like 6 months before someone will pick you up. Because again, like Barry already said, was the COVID just mucked you up. So knowing where you sit, knowing, do you take a side hustle? What do you do? And I think for me, it's always that fear of branching out. And I've done it a few times where I stepped out of IT, and it's the fear of no money, and that's probably the quest that I'm trying to work out is how do you succeed in keeping your career path going, whether I want to make a career change or not. But then it's saying, well, how do I support myself? Like Barry's said the same thing. Was what do? You worry about your family, your house, the car, everything. And that's where I am. And I'm interested to hear what Barry has to say, and of course everybody else. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for expressing that type of vulnerability we all feel, mid-career or not. It's a bit of a scary time when you see lots of media and things saying jobs will be displaced in the next 5 years. Things are accelerating, whether you're in tech or not. So it's a bit concerning. I found, and that's after the fact, right, of COVID. But yeah, Ahmed.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amit. I'm currently working as a senior network engineer, but I actually have few career changes as well. Like I used to work with Nokia as a mobile network engineer, where we used to manage Tesla-like kind of environments. But then I came to Australia, and then I started working as a network engineer. I had to relearn pretty much everything, because whatever I do today, I didn't know anything about it, say 15 years ago. And then Barry knows, of course, that now I'm kind of pivoting into software engineering. But apparently there are some people here who have actually done 180-degree kind of shifts, like Clint. He's an engineer and runs a dance studio in the evening. Barry, a physiotherapist, has nothing to do with software engineering, say 6-7 years back, and now he's a software engineer. So my path, I think, was kind of easy in terms of that I have computer sciences backgrounds, and all of my career shifts were still within the same kind of umbrella, right? Which is like computer engineering. So yeah, pretty much that's it. The reason I joined in, because I actually wanted to. So for example, if I want to become something else tomorrow, I think at particularly at my age, it's really hard to unlearn and learn some new skills. So that's exactly why I'm here, to understand how to do that. That's the thing which is quite challenging for me. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Ahmed. Very, very interesting. So yeah, it might even be a skill like unrelated to your job, right? That you're trying to learn, like cooking or whatever
Yeah.
it is,
Yeah.
religion. I don't know. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
but it still has that same tenets that you need to be aware of, and it's very hard to learn as an adult, which I'll talk about a bit later. Matt, if you're here, no, I think he's just in the background. But I think there's another fella that's joining on that he actually messaged me on LinkedIn and said your password doesn't work. So we'll introduce him soon. So my background, so I've been a physio for over 19 years now, actually. And I got involved in digital health consulting. And as a result of that, I fell in love with technology. But if I look back a bit early on in my childhood, I loved fidgeting with things and building stuff and playing with computers, like with most nerdy Asian kids. But then during COVID, when that hit, my practice was thriving at the time, and then all of a sudden everything stopped. I started a computer science master's at the time, and the first unit was programming. And I was doing that. It was actually horrible, even though I got 94% for the unit in programming. It involved programming using written exams. So I was like, what the hell? Like, Where's this going to go? It's not even practical, and this is not how you learn. So there was a 5-month boot camp, full-time boot camp at the time, because they were desperate for software engineers because they couldn't bring them into the country. And I did that, and I ended up getting a job as a professional engineer in the middle. So interestingly, I'm just under 40 at the time. Very difficult to learn. And felt very uncomfortable. I was like, okay, what the hell am I doing? Right? I'm going from senior position to a junior being mentored by 20-year-olds, essentially, that in very senior positions, in high paid positions. And I was like, right, I'm the oldest guy here. None of these guys have kids. All these guys are half my age. Not really, but you get the point. So very fast paced. And as a result of that, I realized that it's doable, but it's very uncomfortable. Can anyone relate to that? Learning something at this age group compared to by osmosis when you're under 25. Yep. So big difference. And I understand that Ahmed recently became a software engineer, and it is very uncomfortable. It's not like you're an 18-year-old, you know, learning to code. So basically, as a result of that, I've fortunately been able to combine everything. Steve Jobs talks about connecting the dots afterwards. So sometimes it's important to dabble and move forward if it feels right. And then eventually somehow you'll be able to compound and build that value together, which creates a unique position for you in the world or the job market. So basically I came up with a framework or acronym GROW, which involves generally for mid-career shift, but in anything that involves some type of transformative learning. I'm not talking about just reading an article in the paper and taking those practical tips there. I'm talking more about things that require practice and mastery, if that makes sense. So anything that involves some kind of complicated skill or hard skill that you need to learn and knowledge, and mentoring. So I'm talking about in the context of a place where people may take many years to develop that skill. Could even be dancing, right? It's not that simple. So the first step to that is G, which is grasp. So what do you actually want to learn practically is a really important question to ask, because we're not young anymore. We don't just learn randomly. We're not a sponge like an early child, right? And secondly, I think as an adult learner, reflective learning is absolutely critical. Understanding where you went wrong, understanding what you've learned in the past that can help you learn this easier from experiences and anecdotes and things like that, and how you can apply generically other skills you've learned in your past to actually get over the line with learning this. That can make the process more comfortable, but I would still say uncomfortable, if that makes sense. It's always uncomfortable. It feels like you're trying to learn something that you don't have any gift in, if that's enough. It feels that hard to learn how to code, for example, at 40, right? And then operate, meaning how are you going to immediately apply these skills practically? If you don't do that, again, we don't have the child brain that just absorbs. We need to be able to relate that to our practical lives and how that's going to help us and improve. So are you working on a project that's passion? Are you working on a project that's going to help you right now? Does it solve a problem now? And then the last one, weaving it in, which is what I'm finding now, and I'm finding success in that. So you got this new junior skill, which may become mid then senior. How are you going to combine it with your old skills? And how can you rebrand yourself in the market as a unique character that is of use? Doesn't make sense? That's weaving. So in my course, there's 6 modules. The first one is firstly, a growth mindset. You've heard this before again and again. People say they're embracing the growth mindset, but I find most often than not, as you get older, it's less true. What I mean by that is you become a bit more fixed in your opinions and values and things, and it's harder to change. So growth mindset is the opposite of scarce mindset, meaning that an example is thinking that you can learn. There's still opportunities for you. You're not too old to join in a group of tech workers, right, that are 25-year-olds. that are more senior than you. Because the world's changing as well. So there's even chief of inclusion, chief of diversity. We're not going to turn into the politics around that. However, we want a diverse workforce now. So there's a great opportunity in that sense for someone very skilled to jump into a job that wasn't traditionally for them, given the change in dynamics in culture, in workplace culture. So a growth mindset is about an abundant world. And I think it's really important that you truly believe that. Otherwise, the next 5 modules don't make sense at all. And secondly, a beginner's mindset, meaning you've made assumptions maybe in the past about how you've learned things. Can you actually wipe that clean and be a junior again? Can you wipe the clean slate and be mentored again or learn new things and then build up your knowledge tree from scratch? Can you compartmentalize that? Does it make sense, everyone? Yep. Okay, so module 2. So that's about accelerated learning techniques and understanding the principles behind that and neuroplasticity. So more recently, in the last decade, they've found that the adult brain, even when you're old, you can still learn and you can still develop new brain cells as a result of new experiences and unique experiences. So it's important to be aware that the science backs this, that you can change career, that you can upskill. And secondly, that it's very possible to do that, but adapting new techniques. Does anyone have any examples of what they do? Let's just share that can help them learn these days that was maybe different from when they were younger. Anyone?
So you can just to make sure I understand, Barry, examples of what exactly?
Of a learning technique that you use now.
Technique.
So I won't give any examples myself, but if
Well, look, for me,
yes,
because I'm a project manager these days, and everybody's coding for me and developing stuff, so I'm actually having to learn what everyone's doing. And the biggest problem I've had just in that space is just saying which programming language I need to understand the best. And there's all these competing stuff. So for what I do is I like to, and this is just not just for IT, this is just in general. If I'm learning something new, whether it's a language like a country language, or doing martial arts and stuff like that, I have to forget absolutely everything and act like a dumbass. And I'm doing this right now with a personal trainer, where I've walked in, I've done this personal, I've been training for years. But I'm now kind of going back into it because I'm having some issues with my knees and stuff. And there's new techniques. I don't know them. So instead of me trying to say, I know this move, I've done it before, I've just gone, no, stuff it. I don't know anything. I'll let the teacher tell me what to do. I will just do and obey. And I think it's a lot simpler if you just go, I forget everything I knew about what I thought I knew and just start absolutely fresh in mind. Do
yes.
not have, like Barry said before, don't make assumptions. Don't think you know something. Just assume that you don't know anything. And I think you go in it like that, you're opening up your mind a little bit to appreciating another person's point of view, or the knowledge that you're being given, because you got to go, okay, like Barry said, compartmentalizing. You have to just say, okay, well, this is something brand new in my head, and just accept it. And that's the problem with people of our age who just come in and go, yeah, I've done that. I've done this plenty of times. I know this. Drawing examples, though, I don't think that that's wrong. I think you need to be able to look at something that you've been told to learn, and then be able to draw on knowledge of an experience that you've had regarding that is a lot more intelligent than trying to cram it into, it has to fall into line with my current knowledge of how things need to be according to what I learned before. And I think that that's what I do anyway. It's like I said, I walk in completely like a dumbass and have no idea and pretend I don't know anything. And I think that makes you ready to absorb. That's just my point of view anyway.
That's a great point there. And absolutely. So spot on with the beginner's mind. And a lot of adults and older, you can hear it all the time when kids complain. Like, you know, the old adage, you can't teach dog new tricks. Oh, my dad, he's getting old. He's just stubborn. Just leave him alone. You've heard that one before, haven't you? That is.
I was going to say, if I can add on to what David said,
Yep.
I had a similar thought some years ago when I actually read an article in New Scientist where
Yes.
they were, I guess, I was essentially reporting on new plasticity, but I'm not sure if they used that term back then. But they said they couldn't find much evidence that adults couldn't learn as well as children. What they could find was that adults were a bit more stubborn and a bit more independent because kids have no choice. Kids,
Yep.
like in the power differential, you know, if the kid gets told they have to study, well, they'll probably study. And if they want to learn the language, well, they have to pay attention to everybody else. So the argument in this New Scientist article was that the main reason why adults can't learn is that they like the motivation, but also it could just be a busy life. Like adults have other things to do. So the other thing I've added to that was that if I do want to learn something new, I have to put a conscious effort into allocating time because I'm not going to be sent off to school the way I was when I was a child to learn. So I agree with everything David said. And like the only thing I'd add, you do have to put the time in. I think David said that implicitly.
Yep.
I'd probably say that explicitly.
Well said. And welcome, Dane. Thanks for coming in. Sorry about the Eventbrite technical issue. If you're there.
Hey, that's cool. Sorry, can you hear me? I don't even know if all my gear's set up properly
Yeah,
here.
feel free to quickly introduce yourself.
Yeah, so thanks for sending us that message. And yeah, sorry, I missed the start of this too.
That's okay. It's recorded.
Yeah, cool. Hopefully I'll be able to catch it later. But yeah, a bit of a background. I'm a physio. Been working as a physio for the last sort of 10 or 11 years. But started to learn software programming over the last couple of years. Just out of interest, really. So kind of at the stage right now where I'm considering like a bit of a career switch. So yeah, I don't know, just reflecting on what you're talking about there. I think what I've found really helpful is I've noticed it has taken longer to pick up these new coding skills as compared to when I was back at uni, like 15 years ago. But I've kind of noticed that I've picked up things during more so the downtime, not when I'm actively learning. It's actually when I'm away from learning afterwards, maybe in the hours after or the days after, where I kind of reflect, or I don't know if maybe that's when the neural changes are happening, but that's when things will like start to connect for me. That's just one thing that I've kind of noticed.
Right. Yeah. So in my course, I talk about that. So in adult learning, you actually need rest. So you need to go intense, deep rest.
Yeah.
You need to sleep, and that's when you learn. And I talk about having naps, meditation, something called non-sleep deep rest, which is yoga nidra. It is very interesting. So so I'm a professional software engineer, and some of the problems I deal with are just horrible, as many of you can see, like looking through like logs and crap like that to debug. And then sometimes I actually need to walk away from the computer without breaking it. But just going for that walk or just having that 15-minute nap, waking up again actually works. And there's something in software engineering called rubber ducking. I mean, you speak out loud, the problem, and sometimes the solution just comes up there, or just writing things down because yeah, so there's all these techniques that you can use. So with adult learning, the key aspect here to emphasize is it requires deep rest. You need to get away from it and then come back to it. And the other point I found was there needs to be a trigger that's beyond the learning itself because you're an adult. And as Clint said, you're preoccupied with other duties. Does it relate to what you need to do? Is there an urgency in your personal life to do this?
Yeah.
It needs to be bloody painful. I'm not sure if you heard me earlier, Dad, but learning at this age is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it just gets more and more uncomfortable. But that's how you make forward strides in that. And that's how this neuroplasticity situation works as an adult. And I think it gets harder as you get older. Yep. Ahmed, your hand up. Yep.
Yeah, sorry, buddy, I have to jump off. Like I said, I have to take care
no
of some
problem.
business back at my work. Yeah,
No problems.
one
Thanks.
of those
Thanks, man.
unfortunate days. All right, thanks everyone. And
All right.
Barry, don't forget to put it onto YouTube because I actually wanna go and watch it.
No problem.
I'm gonna go through this. All right, cheers.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Ahmed.
Thanks.
Have a
Thanks
good
everyone.
Friday.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Yep. Cool. So does that kind of make sense? So you need deep rest, you need an intense period of learning that probably doesn't go beyond 1.5 hours. And it needs to be broken up. So a 9 to and you realize that with your energy levels, it shifts through the day. They say that early in the day, it's better to do more convergent type of thinking tasks where it's more linear thinking. And then towards the end of the day, when you're tired and a bit phased out, it's better to do creative tasks. So in the content, I talk about how to structure the day based on the most recent science on that and how your circadian rhythms actually matter. And sometimes that 9 to 5 block does not work. Yeah, so there's a lot in there to unpack, but generally it's about having like massive discomfort and a person will need to do it. That's a pain point, and then doing it and then resting it and then reflecting and then going hard again. It's kind of like this on-off switch. Like you're in a sprint, then you let go, then in a sprint, let go. And that's very different from how, an 18-year-old potentially learns and crams for an exam. And then the cycle of learning, unlearning, and relearning, which is the most difficult part as an adult. So we talked about earlier, having a beginner's mind, as David suggested, like testing your own and challenging your own assumptions about life and the facts that you thought were true because you learned it in your uni degree, but it's absolutely not true anymore. How do you reconcile that as a part, of your identity, that you did all this stuff, but the world's changed? An example is like an old surgeon doing a certain technique, but they found that doing exercise can avoid the surgery altogether. How would you feel in that situation, training thousands and thousands of hours for that technique? And that's also another uncomfortable position to be in. And I'd say along this, it's around embracing technology and change. It's around working with what's changing and AI, for example, to help you rather than being left behind and holding your own old views, which can have a negative impact on your career too. So has anyone here experienced unlearning something before and how they went about it? Meaning you thought something true was for most of your life and you're adamant about it, right? Maybe you even preached about it to others, like your kids or colleagues, but then suddenly you had a change in mind about that idea. Anyone? Could be anything.
I think one example I've got, which is related more to dance than engineering, was that, or maybe it is somewhat related, is I thought there would be very hard and fast rules about it because that's what's like with engineering. You're applying the laws of nature. But then there was this point, and I always said, what's the proper way to do this? What's the proper way to do that? And then I realized that everything's made up. Like everybody's created all these different dances. The rules actually aren't there. You had to reframe from being very prescriptive to understanding what your goals were and looking for different ways of achieving those goals. It was somewhat ill-defined. So you had to go from being very prescriptive to be very interpretive and iterative in the way you tried things to see if it actually went any better. And the result was you never actually knew if you had it right or not. You could only say, this is the way I do it. Seems pretty good. Maybe one day I'll find a better way. So I actually went back in my certainty of these particular things. That's probably a big change I can remember, where I had to really let go of this notion of certainty.
Very interesting. It's almost like for me, I thought the problem solving skills I learned as a physio was directly applicable to coding. I'm like, oh, I'm a good problem solver, right? I should be able to debug, but it's literally not the same at all.
Just on that note, I mean, to talk in a non-technical aspect, I mean, I've been doing overseeing facility fit outs for workshops and stuff like that. And, automatically I walk in the door and I'm thinking, oh yeah, there's an IT solution for that. There's a bit of network, equipment I can put in it, but it's not what they want. They want to know what it is that they need to do in an order fashion. So now I have to draw on it, other skill sets and forget everything because I'm in solution mode. I'm constantly in solution mode, trying to work out how I can fix the problems. But sometimes it's not about fixing the problems. It's just doing what you've been asked to do. And so you have to take a step back and go, what is it that I need to do to make them happy versus, oh, here's what I would do if it was me doing it, and looking at it and going, that's wrong. It's not really the way we should be doing it. But then realizing, hang on, now I need to learn about what their mindset is, how their industry works, how the equipment and facility setups are supposed to work. I had to learn it all from scratch, and no one's there to teach me. They're all looking at me. Oh, we've heard you can do these things. Who told you? But I'll take the challenge, and it's a logical step, because then you go back and say, well, okay, well, I'm not going to go into it in a solution mode. I'm simply going to map what they've asked me to do, and then basically forget everything that I know about what I should do, and just go straight into, all right, what do you want me to do so I can meet your goals? But there's no technical solution. I'm organizing some prep bays for a spray booth, and I go, I've never done one before. What do I need to do? Now I have to start going, well, if I was doing it myself, I'd do this. I get my nail and hammer and bang something together. But then you find out, no, there's a certain way you have to do it. So you go, all right, forget what I did know. I need to now really appreciate it. It goes back to that whole thing where you just come in as a dumbass, but you got to, at the same time, you're breaking into a new industry, and you've got to be professional, and you've got to be seen to be a leader. And that's a problem too, because leadership is part of that career change where you say, I'm doing this, but I've got to, not that you don't know what you're doing and pretending you are. It's just learning from everybody around you what you should be doing, and then showing, all right, everybody, let's all do this together in the right fashion. That's what I've noticed. It's really about knowing who you can draw information from to support you in the process of moving into that. So yeah, I do have to unlearn.
Absolutely. So yeah, on that note, I think what I've learned, so you feel this imposter syndrome sometimes, like being hired as a junior engineer, or as you said, David, you should know this. But it's important to be able to zoom out and in that skill, which is very difficult. So zooming out meaning, so what's the bigger picture in this? You're a junior engineer, but you're a senior physio. You're not the same as everyone else. And don't get hooked into that, thinking that you are like everyone else. Do you know what I'm saying? You're like that junior engineer at 20-something that got to senior within 2 years because you're a wizard 10x dev. I think you need to be realistic and understand the context. And it's important to be able to zoom out and look at it in that way, and just be humble and show that you can learn new things, and show that you can reset from a blank canvas, which is very difficult and uncomfortable. I keep using the word uncomfortable, and I like how you said being a dumbass. I think it's a key thing. Acting naive, like genuinely naive. Like, what don't I know? What do I know? What should I know? And what I know that's probably incorrect. Do you know what I'm saying? That's not verified. And that's a difficult process. So and then in module 4, I talk about productivity, and this is in the context of a very busy life. So I think as a mid-career professional, you should have more insight and maybe even resources to outsource a lot of your things that you shouldn't be doing. An example is you should be able to delegate better some of your personal tasks. The key part here is to reduce your cognitive load on things that you don't need to deal with, and reduce context switching so you don't burn out in the process. So I've been working about 80 hours a week for God knows how long now. And it's actually sustainable to do if you've got the right techniques. And one great one you could use is, have you guys heard of a Pomodoro technique? So when you go hard for like 20 minutes and then you have a rest for 5 minutes, like with a timer, and then go hard for 20 minutes and go rest again. But in that 5-minute rest, you're not looking through, scrolling through your phone, but you're actually resting. Again, we went back
What was that called? I'm familiar with the
Pomodoro.
25 thing. I'm familiar with, but the
25.
name. Yeah, what was it?
Pomodoro.
Homodoro. How do you spell that?
Pomodoro technique.
Okay. Pomodoro.
Very
Okay.
important. And the second one is time boxing. Have you guys heard of time boxing? Time boxing is when you give yourself a limited amount of time to do something, and usually you can get it done. If you give lots of time, I think there's a law to that. You'll probably fill in that amount of time before you get something done.
Yeah, it reminds yeah, things take as long as it takes, or things
Takes,
it takes as long as time you allocate to it.
And everyone's heard this. Yeah, you know what I mean? All the productivity coaches talk about this, but who actually practices this? Where you're like, okay, I should be able to get this done within an hour. I'm going to time box myself to get it done in an hour. If I don't get it done in an hour, then what do I need to do? I need to reflect and go, why didn't I get it done in an hour? Does it make sense? So there should be a learning metacognition cyclical process above the actual task, but to think, what the hell did I do wrong? Why didn't I get it done? Was I distracted during that period? Did I do it at the wrong time of day? Didn't I get enough sleep? I don't know. It's hard work, isn't it? As a mid-career person or later to do this. But I think it's a critical aspect to be your own judge, right, of your productivity and setting goals. Like, this should be done in half a day. Why didn't I get it done? And I think half a day is generally too long. You should have smaller checkpoints, like in software, you break down complex problems into small tasks. And then having great mentors around you so that you don't make silly decisions in that process is also important. Yes, David?
Sorry, no, I was just thinking that one of the downsides of walking away from something to give yourself a brain break, because sometimes you get the epiphanies when you walk away and you do something completely opposite to what you're actually doing. But we were always told to walk away from the desk 15 minutes every hour to make sure, just for your eyes, let alone anything else, so that you don't get yourself stuck in a rut, and then your back's pain. But it's really, the benefit, of course, is that what you're saying is that if you walk away from something for a short period, whatever it is, it's comfortable, that then your mind resets.
Yeah.
And it just says, okay, well, then you go back to what you were doing, and you go, I've got a new, fresh view of what I was doing. Now I can think a little bit clearer, because I've allowed, because you can always easily get so entrenched in something that it's just in a cycle, and you can't break the cycle because you're not seeing what you should see. You're seeing what you're focused on, and then you lose the ability to be productive. That's what I've learned anyway.
Absolutely. And I talk about it in my course around dopamine levels. So being shit bored helps. Does it make sense? Dropping your dopamine levels so you're not constantly stimulated in your 5-minute break, as per se. Just going for a nature walk where there's no stimulation helps that. Am I making sense what I'm saying? Not sitting there playing video games in between or something like that, which is high dopamine stimulant. Or having a coffee in between, right? Which may increase your stress too. So yeah, having a nap is a good example of that. But hopefully that sort of idea comes across, that you need to lower your dopamine and stimulant levels when you break so that you can go back into it intensely. And we're not talking about calorie type of energy levels. We're talking kind of like neural stuff. Does it make sense? Where if you don't do that, you just become more burnt out by the end of the day. I'm sure many of you have felt that way. Do you know what I'm saying? It's just, blocking the time in that way and making sure your schedule timing fits the task you're trying to do. Don't put something hard like a debugging task at the end of the day at 6 o'clock, right? It's just not where you put it. But maybe a creative writing or reflective task might be better at that point. But my whole point there is, reflecting on another layer around setting goals, right? Like a time box goal, and thinking, what the hell did I do wrong? Ask a mentor, you know what I mean? Like, should I have done that coding task like a senior, more experienced person than you in that hour? No, what did I do wrong? Was my approach. So it's important to learn about that, not just learning about the information or understanding the, for example, in this case, engineering fundamentals. Is that clear there? Yep. So module 5, many people hate this. Some people love it, but networking and collaborative learning. So getting involved in mini projects with other people that are like-minded. As I said earlier, as an adult learner, you need to do something that's practical, that applies to your life, that's meaningful, more so than someone younger who needs just to do an assignment. As Clint earlier said, you just go do the exam, right? You got no choice, do your homework. It's not the same. So I think networking is a very underrated thing. Sometimes it's feels a bit snaky and slimy. You know what I'm saying? Like a salesperson. I don't want to talk about it in that sense, but just attending this webinar in itself is like a networking opportunity, right? In a sense. And I think it's important that you allocate time, even if you're an introvert, to connect with people that you don't normally connect with like-minded people, to slowly open up the opportunities. And that's helped me a lot significantly in my career. And sometimes it's free and sometimes it's not free. I'll give you an example when it's not free. So if you really want to meet executive or key decision makers, right, to help you do something, sometimes you have to pay for that expensive workshop because you won't see them anywhere else. Because who are you to be connected with them? Am I making sense? But the fact that you pay to get into a certain network or program or something like that can significantly help. You have access to certain people that you may not normally have access to. Am I making sense?
Yeah, may I ask you a question on that one, Barry? When you say you're paying to be somewhere,
Yep.
is this explicitly a networking event that you're paying to go to, or is it something where you have an opportunity to network as long as you show the initiative?
It depends on the situation. It could be like an example would be like you're raising money for a startup, but you need to have access to family offices and ultra high net worth individuals. We typically won't be able to have a coffee with them, right? Typically. So it might be important to show your seriousness and pay, that amount for the event so that you can actually have direct access to them, as one example. Another one might be to get an idea around some experts, like AI experts or whatever, that you generally wouldn't be able to connect with them on LinkedIn because they get a lot of inquiries and things that people who want to meet with them, but they might be on a certain speaking circuit where you can actually pick their brains and get their business cards afterwards, is another example. Does that clear things up?
Yep.
And then there's the ones where you can actually approach them on LinkedIn. LinkedIn makes it so much easier as a tool to do this and actually to craft your own personal brand and things, which I'll talk about in the next module. So the last module is about personal branding, which I found my LinkedIn has helped me significantly in reaching out with everyone and getting my next opportunities, consulting roles, jobs, startup opportunities, and the whole lot, software engineering jobs. And it's important to regularly reflect and change your LinkedIn. It's a dynamic thing. And ask the question, why are you publishing yourself like that? Does it make you look bad? Does it make you look good? Does it help you achieve your goal? And how you can use it as a tool, like a business card or website, to network with the right people you need to as well. And I'm telling you that this is an underutilized resource. You can blog, you can post, and they can share your thoughts, which can help you establish some kind of credibility around your area, which is what I did. In fact, my LinkedIn newsletter has over 1,000 followers on this topic, right? Mid-career shifts. And I have people like Harvard professors there that have public, figures. There's lots of public figures on there. Lots of CEOs that I wouldn't expect to meet in person that have joined, including, I think, even Elon Musk's son, Damien, is a follower. And he's a he's a quantum physicist at You know what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is get yourself out there, get your thoughts out there. You're not going to lose anything, but that's part of the brand building you can use with LinkedIn as an example. And connect with your old employers. Get the testimonials. It all adds up. Do you know what I'm saying? Ask them for your recommendations when you work with them. Start messaging a few people that you haven't connected with for a while. And then just build that up and use that as your CV, right?
So
Any,
Barry,
yes.
sorry, you're I think the battle is the difference between an introvert and an extrovert, because the issue, like, say for me, and I struggle with getting out there and, like you're saying, knocking on the door and just saying, you know, can I pick your brain, or, you know, whatever. But in my role, I'm constantly on the in the front of everybody's faces, negotiating and cutting deals and making people work. And I think that the issue is how do you break through that introverted behavior? I mean, you're an extrovert. You're always out there. You know, as long as I've known you, you've been able to introduce me to a number of people of influence. It's and I look at my list of people that I know, and I have a long list of people I know are influential, but I feel that I don't want to reach out to them because I know they're busy. And then you go, well, how do I fix that problem? And to the second point, your LinkedIn discussion is interesting, because I had dinner with a branding expert a year ago, and he said very clearly what you need to do to kickstart your brand is come up with a very short, sharp paragraph of what makes you special. And that's it. It's not a bragging thing. It's purely just saying, this is what I'm good at, and that's what you should know me for. And he said that will help people come to your door without having to solicit attention. But that's just my experience so far.
No, absolutely. So another way to think about this is think of yourself as a product in a market. You need to look through LinkedIn. Are you actually unique? You may think you're unique, right? But in your contacts or the relevant people, appropriate contacts you want to deal with, are you unique? And how does your message, your LinkedIn message, fit into that? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and what you're posting to your network. And you can easily use LinkedIn as a tool, right? Work out what education they have, what titles they have, what industries they have. You can almost track it, you know, if you really wanted to, with Google, all the way down to their demographics, right? And personal profiles. So I think the key thing is to look at LinkedIn as a product, like a startup in itself, and then work out where you fit in and whether your message does actually stick out or it just sounds like another dude, right? That's gone from physio to software engineer. Am I making sense? So that's the tricky part. And I think that takes a bit of learning, business skill, maybe coaching. There's companies that help with that. But I think there's a bit of common sense there, but it's seeing the LinkedIn profile as a product that you offer. The reason why I say it's a product, because it's essentially a service, isn't it? Like you're adding value. Whether you're even if you're liking someone's post, that's adding value somewhere. That's giving someone else more credibility or, you know, affirmation around the content. Sharing something's the same thing.
Sorry, Barry,
Yes.
when and I've noticed this with other industries, so I'm trying to be more broad spectrum with what I'm thinking about, particularly like thinking like I'm now trying to create a side hustle so that when I don't have regular career-based work, that I could just go, oh, look, I've still got some passive income coming through, but I'm not looking at it like investment strategies. It's about having something that's product and service that I provide when I've got time, or, you know, people ask. And I was talking with the cafe owner that I know, and I'm looking at it from his perspective. He's using things like Instagram and such to promote his product base, which is non-professional, as I call it. So he's able to be also use the platform, but it's about I think the issue really is when you start moving into a rebranding process, is that, you know, knowing what you're providing to the public and say, well, look at me, I'm good for this. But then, you know, it's in this cafe's sense, it's lots of food pics and talking to staff, and they go, okay, so he's been getting a lot of interesting feedback, and I suppose that's how he's promoted his brand and his product range, and he has more than one cafe. So he's promoting one at a time. It's interesting to watch, but to understand that, you know, where do you need to promote your brand
That's a
is,
very good question.
yeah.
Sometimes I've learned that sometimes you need to omit a lot of things. If you're
Yes.
using LinkedIn to get a job, you
Mm.
don't want to look like you're distracted. So it's about playing that game. What are you using The question is, what are you using this tool to achieve?
Mm.
Is it for your own vanity metric, you know? Or is it
I
is it
think yeah, sorry, Barry. What I've experienced is that if you use LinkedIn, and nothing wrong with that because it's based around professional services, but your LinkedIn needs to be clean for the purpose of what you're doing that for,
correct?
and you
Correct.
need to create a new identity somewhere and it can be in LinkedIn, but it has to be completely separate from whatever
Absolutely.
your
Absolutely.
career is. Yeah.
And that's a key point. So what are you using the LinkedIn for? To get recruiters to become a software engineer, to get consulting, or to network, right? With entrepreneurs or whatever, or get investors. Very different. And I find LinkedIn is very underrated in that way, that people don't think about it. They just dump stuff up, but it's concerning.
Mm.
Everyone can access your public LinkedIn, right? And they can see what you're doing. Everyone Googles everyone, right? These days. So it's important to understand that question about why you're using these tools and what tools most appropriate, and also doing a quick desktop research on the landscape, right? And where you fit in. Does your title that you write in your LinkedIn, does your bio fit into, you know, your ecosystem or your tribe?
Mm.
Um,
Yeah. Look, the difficulty, and I see where Clint's coming from, is like, you know, if you're talking about having a completely different industry like dance and you're trying to promote, and I have experience with martial arts dojos and stuff like that, where it's a completely new environment and it's a clean slate, and they're not interested in whether or not you did, you know, you're a pastry chef or whatever that your career path was. They're saying, well, what makes you special, particularly for this industry that you decided to pop up out of nowhere from? And so how do you create a new profile for yourself that says, why am I good in this new industry? And why am I just popped up out, you know, on your screen for no random reason? So it's knowing how to rebrand yourself again to be successful in your new venture.
Absolutely. You don't want them to read it and then have this cognitive load overwhelm issue. Doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. Like, oh, this guy seems to be good at everything. I don't get it. It's too hard.
Yes.
You kind of need to put yourself in the shoes of the recruiter or whoever you're dealing with and think, what is their own thinking patterns? What are they looking for? And just highlight that. Often less is better than more in this case, which is what I found. Any questions about that, guys? It's an interesting topic, and it's like a whole, you know, minefield in its own around branding. But I think it's absolutely even more critical in the mid-career stage, where you've got a lot of your CV is a lot longer, right, than a 20-year-old, and how you actually craft that and how you reword things to achieve its purpose practically. And you can always change it. Again, it's about change, right? We're all about embracing change. So the practical takeaways from what we just spoke about, which has been great. I'm glad everyone shared their thoughts and experiences, is, yeah, adopt a growth mindset. And that's very different, right? From embracing a beginner's mindset. So we're talking about a growth mindset around thinking abundantly. Don't follow signals, not noise. Am I making sense? You look in the media, for example, and it says software engineering jobs, there's so many layoffs and stuff, right? In the big tech, you shouldn't get into it. Don't think like that. I don't think it's a great idea. literally have a look at where you fit in. It's really important to work out where you sit in, as I said, and where you're unique. There's always opportunities everywhere, and that's embracing an abundance mindset. A beginner's mind. I think David explained it really well, which was around acting like a dumbass in all situations. Not being the Mr. Know-it-all, right? Doesn't matter how old you are, you probably don't know. And I think given the changes happening in the world with science and technology and how everything's changing, even socially, it's important to be able to take a step back. I don't know nothing. You know what I'm saying? And being able to zoom in and out of things. And then as we talked about, recognizing that you might have thought you're great at maths, right? When you're 18, but you're probably no longer good at maths in the same way now, right? So understanding the similarities and contrasts and differences around how you are learning and how you engage in things now compared to the past is important. And then backing that up with, the science behind it and understanding what actually truly is true and not. And then learn, unlearn, relearn. I think the unlearning bit, if you can do that 80% of the time, then you're probably, 80% there, right? That's the hardest bit I've found consistently with my own career, even to today. After 2.5 years being in a professional position at a big tech firm in enterprise CRM systems, how the hell do you unlearn your problem-solving skills? You know what I mean? How do you unlearn some of the mistakes in your thinking, right? And your logic and your critical reasoning and your meta learning to address that. And I highly encourage you to get great mentors around you. In doing a course like the one I'm going to publish, and I'm going to add like an online network and support network around that with like-minded individuals around that, which can help this. So you need mentors. You need people who have been there, done that. It's not new, right? People have done it. I've done it. A lot of others have done it. Clint's done it. David's done it in many ways. You know what I'm saying? It's just making sure you're doing everything optimally so you don't, fall by the same mistakes, because we don't have time to waste. We got the time ticking as well, right? So it's important. Networking with peers, we talked about that. Again, you got to ask yourself the question around that. Enhancing your personal brand, we talked about that in length, about your digital profile and how that is impacted and what you need to use and how you get to remold it for the purpose of what you want to do with it, which is important. Removing your ego, right? And that's coming back to the beginner's mindset. You might think that's important, that that sales position that you went from 0 to 1,000% growth, right, is important. But maybe it's not related to that dojo job you're looking for, right? So it's really important to remove things rather than add things. And I find with most mid-career and senior career professionals, more is added than removed. Am I making sense? So it just makes you look like you're all over the place, which is not a good thing. But I'm telling you, most people are all over the place secretly. They're just better marketers. Do you know what I mean? They're better communicators. You look at someone like Elon Musk, look how many things he's involved in, but what do people think he is? Doesn't make sense. Very simple message. But he's failed. He's done so many projects at the same time, right? Like everyone else. So don't think that's a bad thing, but sometimes it's better to just clean things up. Simplicity is better when it comes to messaging your personal brand and making sure your story is authentic and lines up in that job prospects. And then as we talked about the GROW model, which I came up with from the course, around understanding the fundamentals and tools that you need to learn at your stage. And that's a bit different for everyone. Some people are more comfortable learning in different ways, like visual versus auditory versus readers. You guys know that better, mind mapping and taking notes, but making sure you're optimizing that and reflecting on that and actually zoning out, like pulling back from that and understanding what works best for you. Reflection is the biggest, I think, gift we have at mid-career. Kids don't reflect as much, right? But with maturity, we should be able to reflect on our past. So something I'll talk about in the course is crystallized versus fluid intelligence. Does anyone know what that is? So crystallized intelligence is your experiences and what you've learned in the past and how you can use that to apply to future learnings and application. While fluid intelligence is something when you're younger, you have higher of being able to deal with a lot of information that's unfamiliar. Unfortunately, as we get older, the fluid intelligence drops a bit, but the crystallized increases. Meaning we should be weighing more towards our crystallized and trying to optimize our fluid. And as we talked about with some of the strategies, examples earlier, we can build our fluid intelligence. We can learn new things quickly as long as we take this different method of resting in between, which we talked about, reducing dopamine levels, etc. Does make sense? Rather than being distracted, which is very hard, but needs to be done. And then operating, so making sure the skills is applied in reality immediately, because our memories probably aren't as good. Not trying to be negative, do you know what I'm saying? But it's important that we apply it into something practical immediately rather than later. So everything you do needs a purpose there and learn. And then weaving that into your career, which is a very difficult bit. That's a bit of an art, as we talked about with the LinkedIn profile stuff and building a personal brand and persona and how you want to achieve your goals as a result of that and what type of network you want to attract or build towards yourself. So any questions about the whole webinar so far, guys? Any thoughts, ideas? Dane, been quiet there.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in. And
Yep.
you've highlighted a number of things that I think that I've seen and experienced, which is good because it reinforces the fact for me that maybe I am doing some things right on the journey to get to where I want to be, which is different than me sitting out there in the cold going, do I know what I'm doing? Am I making sense? And that's my biggest problem at the moment, is that when you have these gaps in contracts for me, and you go, well, if I put some time into doing something else, is it going to work for me or not? What am I really thinking about it in enough way? There's so many products and courses out in the space that talk about similar things, but and they'll go, well, this is how you do a startup business from scratch, and the government will tell you this is how you do things. But what it doesn't tell you is what you're talking about, is understanding that you need to make the switch. You need to actually say, well, what is it that I have to do to get to the next step in my life, and understand that, you know, it's not easy, but you need to be open to change, look for people. And sometimes I find that, and you mentioned about the younger ones being, you know, supervising yourself in your new world. And I was in that position where I was the young one, and I had a 60-year-old, you know, programmer who just did his job. And you go, you know, you had to work with them all the time, and just, but he was happy. He just generated output. But you go, I'm his boss, but he's got more years experience than I have. But then you go, well, maybe I need to just accept the fact that I've been put in this position for a reason. And so when you step outside your comfort zone, I think the problem for most people is, again, it comes down to money and going, well, can I afford to make this leap of faith into an area that I have some knowledge of, but probably a little bit scared to do, like buying a business, for example. You go and buy a news agent. What do you have to do? I've never done one before. So you go, well, what do I have to do to learn? But do I have the financial confidence to make that leap? It's either sit there and go, I'm going to have to starve anyway, or do I make some kind of commitment and see if I can do it right? And then what do you need to do to make that big career change? You know, some career changes require a business plan. And it's not as easy as it sounds to make one, but you know, someone picks through it. Well, what the hell? So when, you know, you guys talking about moving from one, you know, the completely separate industry into one that's, you know, designed for the technical people, which is a very logical and process driven environment. You can learn any computer language, but the problem is, you know, the syntax and the logic applied, and is it meeting the solution? And of course, there's all the surrounding stuff now with cybersecurity and a whole bunch of things that you may or may not need to know, but you need to appreciate. And so it's a constant learning cycle. You never stop learning. You need to constantly explore it and find out new information about what you want to do, existing career and future career. Because you go and step out, like I said previously about, setting up a paint shop. Well, it's not easy because I don't know any of the regulations. Well, I got to learn that, and it changes, and the chemicals they use change, and techniques for spray painting cars change. Do I need to know this? I don't run the place, but I do need to appreciate how to set it up for someone else. And well, I have to learn from everybody around me as they are the experts, or I believe they're experts. And so when I make that change in my life to go down another path, not only do I have to learn about it, but I need to find out other people's experiences in the same space and apply it and say, is it applicable to me? Or is it just good to know that someone else has experienced it and, you're not stupid enough to go down that path? I mean, there's a lot of things that you have to think about that you don't think about when you're boxed in and you're making that decision to make a career change. You go, I think it's a good idea. And then you start learning about it and you realize it's harder than I thought. And then you start saying, like, Barry, you said mentors and stuff like that. Well, where do you find the mentor? And, you haven't got a lot of money to play with most of the time because you're living off what you can to make your change. You've saved up a little bit. You might have a bit of money in the bank, but it doesn't last very long. And that's one of the fear factors that are involved in changing your presence in the workforce is, what am I doing? Will I see money? And if you're setting up a new business, like a dance, it could be 12 to 18 months before you see return on investment. And that's mostly out of your own pocket. There's no one putting money in most times. It's very rare that you get someone who, comes in and says, I'll invest in what you're doing, because they don't see the benefit necessarily. And it makes it very hard for everybody to, make that leap of faith. You do it. I know some friends have done it that are not in this discussion, of course, but they had a great idea. They wanted to develop it. They took time out of their regular career path to do it, and then found out it didn't work. The product was fine, but they couldn't launch and they couldn't get out into the market, and they were getting very little acceptance. What do we learn from that? Is that, did they not know how to brand themselves properly? Or they didn't understand the market the way they should have understood? So that's the pitfalls that you're going to face when you change, because out of desperation, you want to change because what you're going down is either stopped or is not working for you anymore. Your life has changed to the point where it's non-productive at home, and you go, well, I need to change it to something I want to do, but is it the right decision? And I think one of the problems you always face with, your mid-career change is it because you just feel like it's a good idea versus this is going to work. But when you do it, the issue will be then, when do you bail when it's not working? When is the right time to say, look, I gave it a good shot, I've got to walk away. Otherwise, I'm just going to end up in a very deep pit and probably owing lots of people money. That's a key issue in the fear factor of going across to another career. Anyway, that's my thoughts.
So that concept there is fail fast. So if you want to learn programming, do something small, right? If you want to do a startup, do something small. Don't invest your whole life in it at the start, and then slowly build up and double down and commit. But yeah, very interesting. Dane, Clint, any questions or thoughts?
I was going to say that there's no questions at the moment. I think you've said a lot of things that I've encountered before, but you've been able to give names to it and things like that. Yeah. And I think on the whole, probably the thing to keep in mind is that it is doable. You can actually do this. That's probably, I think, for a lot of people who might be watching the recording of this later on, or if they stumble across or something like that, I think the moral is that you haven't found anything to suggest that it actually can't be done. Everything you've, I think, highlighted is things that people do to themselves to stop them from making this change. And on the whole, that's pretty reassuring.
Yeah, it's doable, but as I said, it's uncomfortable. It can be painful, can be highly risky if it's not calculated properly. and it can be painstakingly hard. Not going to say it's easy, particularly when you're talking about learning something completely new in another industry, right? From scratch, where often it takes people, years, many years to master, including dancing or coding. You know what I mean? It's not like about doing a short course. I'm talking here about, full on, like learning to code to be of commercial use to a big company is an example from a completely another profession. And it's hard, but it's doable. And I think we're going to see a world where there's more and more of these people, unfortunately, in many ways too, as fortunately, right? Because I think it's just tough economically, and people will need to upskill and work later into their careers to deal with some of these technological changes and revolutions that are happening too. Anything else on that point before I wrap?
Hey, bro. Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, I really wish I caught the start of it because you might have covered this already, but just building off what, yeah, I guess Clint and David have both kind of mentioned there. Could you just go over again for us, like, how long did it take you actually to make that transition from physio into software, and
Yep.
I guess why did you want to do it? And because it looks like you've both worked for companies as a software engineer and also started your own kind of startup. So was it for one of those two reasons that you wanted to get into it, or was it sort of you were leaning towards more one versus the other? Or yeah, I'd just like to get your
Okay.
insight on that.
Great question, Dan. I've got 5 minutes, so feel free to ask more questions, right? And I'm happy to, catch up with you afterwards on it. But it's actually out of like desperation, frankly. I didn't know what I was doing. I was kind of thinking, okay, so I did this master's in computer science because I had criticism in the industry that why is Barry in digital health without an IT or technological background initially? So I started a master's in computer science, like literally for that. And then I was like, oh God, I'm not working anymore. What if this COVID thing lasts forever, right? And I can't do hands-on physio. That's my main thing. And I was burning out, frankly, as a physio. Like my hands were getting sore. Probably heard that before. I didn't know I could last, and I wanted more time with my kids. And frankly, I got 3 kids, and 2 of them in expensive private schools. I want the best for them that I didn't have, and I saw 2 things. So I was inspired by this guy called Naval Ravikant. So he started AngelList. He's a thought leader in Silicon Valley, and he talked about there's 2 ways of creating large amounts of wealth in this era, where the costs are controlled and where you can have more and more growth. The 2 are creating content or writing code. Does it make sense? So I thought to myself, software engineering's really well needed. It seems to pay really well. There's people who will get to senior in 2 years and earn 200K a year easily. It's still like that now. I know it's a bit unfair on others, but now the demand's dropped because of the demand supply curve. However, I thought if I can get, this sorted out in 2 or 3 years, that's great. I'll continue on my practice, hire more people for my physio clinic, and then be able to get to my startup in a different perspective. One of the problems with my startup was I used to always hire like developers, and they'll always get it wrong, and it usually overblow my costs, and I can't iterate or anything. So as a result of that, I thought that was a secondary benefit. So as a result of that, ChatGPT came out last year, and then I created an awesome AI startup that's picked up a lot of traction from my software engineering skills as a result of that, as a side project on top of being software engineer and still as a physio. So back to that point around, financial stuff. Unfortunately, you need to even go harder during that period, right? Because you're going to be on a junior wage. You need to do something to supplement your income to keep it going. So I actually didn't know where I was going with that, but I knew that I wanted to be in tech entrepreneurship. I hear some mentors saying you need to learn how to code. You need to learn how to hack together your proof of concept without paying anyone. And that actually worked out for me because you need to code, you need to get feedback. To pay someone to ongoingly do that until you hit product market fit, you'd have to be almost a millionaire these days, frankly. To get to that point on top of everything else. Does that, and I just love the idea, the concept of problem solving. Always love that. And I love I mean, physio is quite, an interactive job, but I just want to try something new that was introverted, that didn't deal with patients for once, because I was frankly burnt out during that COVID period. And yeah, it's been great for me, even though I'm an extrovert. So does that answer your question there, Dane?
Cool. Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. So it sounds like, did you finish that computer science degree or,
No, I didn't have to. So
okay. Okay, cool.
So I was very lucky. The great thing about many of these tech companies is they don't look at your degree. It's all based on merit. And I fortunately was beating new grads and computer science grads in my aptitude tests and my coding challenges and stuff, even though I did a 5-month boot camp. Does it make sense? So it's not related to that directly in tech, which is great, which is what I loved about tech. It's based on merit, even though the stereotype is, there's an ageism type of problem, but I don't think that is quite correct in that way. Do you know what I'm saying? Any other questions there, Dave?
Sorry, just on what you were saying, Barry, your experience, the thing that you bring to the table when you make a change from an intelligent industry to another intelligent industry is the fact that you've been able to prove yourself in a field that requires a high degree of intelligence.
I'd say, yeah, that's software engineering is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I'm not sure because of my age or whatever, but
no. Physio is going to be the hardest because you're talking about stuff that the physiology of people,
yeah,
and
that's hard
then
to.
you go, but there's a cause and effect, and software engineering is exactly the same. There's a cause and effect. You write something, and then something happens, and if you muck it up, it's the output's garbage in, garbage out. So there's a limit to what people can achieve from changing career paths, because what you're doing is you're saying, I'm gone from a highly intelligent physio career to a highly intelligent, and I wouldn't say software engineering is that intelligent, but to know all of software engineering, to include the other aspects now with networking and understanding that the tools that you've got available, and now with cybersecurity, it has become a bit harder now. But you've come in from a highly intelligent learning experience previously, and now applying it into another industry that, while it's separate, is still something where you need to put a lot of brain power behind. I think that sometimes you got to know your limitations, and I think that's key to this change. Is for me, it was a software engineer moving into project management. Then finding out project management is a very broad spectrum approach, but then applying the skill set, because I'm a very analytical person. Now I'm having to say, well, okay, well, I've got to look at the human aspect of everything. It's no longer a cold case scenario of I want this built. It's now I've got to look at people and their interactions and negotiate with them all the time. Now I'm having to use my people skills, which a software engineer is not good for.
No.
It's
They're
Yeah.
horrible, horrible. They can't even, most of them can't even look in your eyes when they're talking.
Correct.
But anyway,
That's my experience anyway.
yeah. But my whole point there is I'm fortunate to be able to combine all the skills together in my startup, which is frankly succeeding in a big way. But I went through a lot of pain to learn the second step of that. Do you know what I'm saying? Maybe I should have done it in reverse. Maybe I should have been a software engineer originally, but I don't think that's the case in retrospect either. Otherwise, you don't understand the people aspect and the design part to that, as David sort of alluded to in that you need domain experience and you need coding skills, because I'm not a billionaire, right? I can't just whip up a proof of concept, and I've got family, right, etc. So yeah, how's that, guys? Dane, any thoughts? So yeah, this is just my LinkedIn newsletter if you haven't following it already.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
A course on it, which is quite big, but I think it's hopefully be quite useful, which will come with a community in itself. That's just my kind of sharing, of knowledge to other people in my situation and related. And then you can connect to my LinkedIn or email me directly if you have any questions. Anything else, guys? I hope that you found that interesting at the very least. Or
That was good. Thanks, Barry.
No, this is awesome. It's a chance to understand. It's one thing to do it yourself. It's another thing to hear about how other people experience it and work through it. It's very good.
Yeah. How'd you find it, Dane, yourself?
Yeah, great. Yeah. Great to
Awesome.
hear your insights. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions before I wrap up at all?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll put the recording on YouTube. And I'll keep everyone updated on this. I still write blog posts on this. There's a lot of information I'd like to share there, but I really hope you can sort of feel that pain that I've been through to get to this point. As I said, it's not for the faint-hearted, and it's out of necessity. You can't get inspired by someone, right, to change profession like this very easily. I don't think so, unless you're maybe a bit younger with less responsibility. But that's it, guys. Thank you. Have a good one.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barry.
No problem.
Cheers.
Cheers.